yourself. Because the problem is you have a person here, and you have the person's behavior over here. Okay? But the person can say a whole bunch of different things. One thing that he might say is be good in a variety of different ways, right? And that has some influence over that behavior. Another thing he might say at a different point, which might be like 3 seconds later, I deserve it. I'll just have a couple. I'm sad. No one will notice. I don't know, something like that, right? It'll only take a few minutes. He'll justify it or rationalize it or come up with excuses. Well, those will tend to move him in that direction. And then there's other determinants, sort of forces, you could say, impinging on his behavior as well, like other people, right? Come on, it'll be great, I'm your friend, which are leading him in that direction. So you have one intention leading him in a different direction, home to March, and at least a couple of others leading him towards this behavior. Right? The basic point is we don't always say the things we don't always do the things that we say we're going to do. Because we say them at one point in time, but we do them at a different point in time. And at that point in time, a whole bunch of other things might be impinging on our behavior. So attitudes and beliefs are not the whole story. It's important to raise awareness, but it doesn't take it all that far. This is a very, very short story I'll tell. I really like this example from the environmental literature because it's a kind of a best case scenario in a sense. So this is back at the end of the 1970s in the US. So you've gone through the 1970s energy crisis, right? Scott Geller is a trained social psychologist and has all the sort of tools at his disposal how to change human behavior. Creates a program to encourage householders to conserve energy in their homes. Okay, and he has about 3 hours of these people's time. So this is, again, the best case scenario. They have slick videos and well-produced materials, information, hands-on training, right? High public awareness of the issue. 3 hours of their time, best case scenario for seeing whether or not you can basically educate people to change their behavior. And the results were stupendously successful. They did surveys afterwards, and they found a greater awareness of energy issues after the workshop. They found greater knowledge of how to reduce people's homes' energy consumption. And they had motivated people. They had found an enhanced willingness to embrace and implement changes. So that's great. You raised their awareness. You did everything that the workshop was supposed to do. Except for the fact that then he went into their homes. And it turns out that despite saying the workshop worked wonderfully, and despite knowing all these great things, almost none of them actually followed through on what they were told to do, and what they said that they were intending to do. 1 in 40 of them lowered their hot water thermostat, which is one of the key things they taught them. 2 in 40 put blankets around their hot water heaters, but it turns out they actually did that before they took the workshop. They looked at a bunch of different things. The only difference really was this one here, right? Between the workshop and a control group who hasn't received the workshop yet, 8 out of 40 installed low-flow shower heads, compared to 2 out of 40 in the control group. So, stupendously successful workshop here, right? You've got an 8 out of 40 instead of 2 out of 40 to put in a low-flow shower head and almost nothing else. And they even gave them these shower heads for free. So, the point is, if you can't get behavior change with a 3-hour in-depth training session where it's clearly in people's own financial self-interest to do these things, then I suggest that information just isn't as powerful as we would like it to be. However, we have long believed that information is the way to go. Right? We have an advertising industry that tells us that, although you could argue about the extent to which they give us information. But hundreds of psychology studies have debunked the importance placed on beliefs and attitudes and information, and you have debunked it yourself in your own life probably a number of times. I'm not 100% certain about it because I haven't met most of you, but I'm fairly certain about it. All you have to do is think about New Year's for a moment. Think about New Year's for a second. Now, how many people have set New Year's resolutions sometimes? Okay, thank you for playing along. So think of the last time that you set New Year's resolutions. Think of the New Year's resolutions you set. Okay, so everybody's got them in their mind. Out of curiosity, were they any of these? How many people would say it was one of those? Thank you for most of you being honest. And how many people would say that this is not the first time that they've set that New Year's resolution? Oh, yeah. That's really interesting, isn't it? Huh. Like, what the hell's wrong with us? Right? Are we all a bunch of losers, basically? That we just say we're going to do stuff, but we never actually follow through on it? I've been setting some of the same New Year's resolutions for, well, I won't even say for how long, actually. Since before we passed the climate change tipping point. Yeah, a long time. Right? Another way to think about it. So, you know, at New Year's, you have all the information, you have all the motivation. But if information was enough, if all you had to do to get people to change their behavior was appeal to their mind, then you wouldn't see any of these things. Right? Because in a strictly logical world, you wouldn't need any of these things, or else they simply wouldn't make sense. Right?
If the recipient was rational, right?
If the recipient was rational.
Yes.
Yeah, if we were actually, you know, robot-like calculators of utility or something like that. And similarly, if financial incentives were enough, if that really truly was what pushed people's behavior around as much as marketers would like us to believe, you wouldn't see any of these things, some of which are the same. Because none of these make any financial sense, strictly speaking, from the perspective of the individual. Right? We just don't make that much sense. Like, we're just not that logical. We make decisions based on other things than financial utility or simple logic. So, thinking about the purpose of activism, trying to make it more effective, you need to get people in the door, first of all, and you need to get them to stay afterwards. Right? And you need to do this in such a way that you're not simply relying on how important your cause is and, you know, strict information about how they can make a difference or whatever the case may be. Well, usually it's about the cause, though, right? Raise awareness, tell them how terrible the situation is, and then surely these people will be so outraged that they will stop being couch potatoes and finally do the right thing and help your cause. Right? What's not likely to be, it's not likely to be enough. One thing to think about is that in psychology, research shows that value congruence is awfully important. Right? Value congruence. This is actually a pretty major deal. We don't like messages that we already disagree with, and we're really good at finding all their flaws and looking at all their negative points, right? And simply forgetting their positive points. We cling to our opinions just the same way we cling to our own identities, and we have all these sort of self-serving biases, if you will, or, you know, these motivational strategies that we use to diss other people's data and evidence that we disagree with, and to, you know, embrace and warm up to people's data and evidence that we do agree with. We also tend to be skeptical to messengers that come at us from a value perspective that isn't ours. Right? So someone that is coming at you from industry, let's say, and if you don't trust industry to begin with, then you will tend to not believe anything that they have to say. But this is also true insofar as the person simply is from a different social group than you. Right? It could be the case that they simply belong to a different cultural group, possibly even a different gender, possibly even just a different age category, and that these things are enough to make it easier for you to discount the message of the messenger, right? The message that they're delivering. If, on the other hand, you can help people to see the similarities between themselves and another person, you make it that much easier for them to accept the message, right? If the messenger is kind of like you, then presumably they're also a reasonable person and trustworthy and these sorts of things, and what they say has some credibility, just kinds of things that you would have to say. The fact, though, that climate change touches so many different facets of people's lives means that there's many, many different value sort of frames that you can take for talking about climate change. Right? You don't have to take a value frame that is about just future generations, or is about protecting the environment or something like that. Right? You can take a value frame that will fit with the value of the values of the audience that you're talking to. So it's a difference of thinking